Welcome, everyone. I'm David Lapiana, Managing Partner at Lapiana Consulting, and I want to welcome you to this special discussion we're having today with three leaders from the youth development field. Right now, the nonprofit sector, as it responds to the COVID-19 crisis, leaders of youth development organizations face a particularly difficult set of challenges. What does the future look like for these essential services that have been paused during this crisis? Is there a predictable timeline for a return to normalcy, and do we even know what we mean by normal anymore? To discuss these issues, we have with us today the leaders of some of our premier youth development organizations. And I also want to mention that I've invited them to speak as well on George Floyd murder and fallout and the simmering human-caused crisis that we're living through at the same time. So let me introduce the panelists. Jim Clark is President and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of America, a federation of more than 4,000 clubs that serve nearly 4 million young people around the country. Jennifer Sirangelo is President and CEO of the National 4-H Council, the nonprofit national partner to America's largest youth development program, delivered to nearly 6 million young people through a partnership with 110 land-grant universities and the Cooperative Extension Program. And Stephanie J. Hull is President and CEO of Girls Inc., the premier provider of leadership development opportunities to more than 156,000 girls across the US and Canada. Welcome to you all. My first question is, let's just start with where we're at right now before we start to talk about the future. You've each weathered the initial shutdown and crisis, the economic crisis, the crisis in your staffing and managing that with your boards. So I would just love to have each of you go around and tell us what you've done to date to deal with the COVID crisis. And why don't we begin with Jennifer?
Sure, thank you, David. And it's great to see my friends and colleagues, Jim and Stephanie. We work together on many levels, so this is great to be together in conversation today. 4-H, like all of us, we've, like every company, we have truly pivoted to a virtual world. In 4-H, we have transitioned to a combination of mostly now doing everything we normally do. We transitioned within about 3 days to virtual learning. We are in every county in America. We have over 3,000 staff that are doing that in over 3,000 counties, 10,000 staff in over 3,000 counties. And it's been pretty impressive what they've done very quickly. So we've also transitioned to having and gathering all of their great ideas. So learning materials, mentoring opportunities, group belonging activities, all of those things that reinforce our theory of change around young people, which is having a caring adult mentor, having a meaningful leadership role, and having skill building activities. Our research shows that's what works, and we're doing all of those online. We've captured it all in a new digital location called 4-H at Home. In addition, our alumni have been stepping up to do some new videos for the kids. Our alumni, like linebacker Avery Williamson, did a workout video at home. Carla Hall has just helped us launch a new digital cookbook and did some videos with that to support kids as they're learning to cook at home. And finally, we do work significantly in rural America, where over 7 million kids today don't have access to the internet around the country, many of them in rural areas. So our staff are doing a variety of things to reach them in an analog environment, from creating brown bag activity kits that they leave in a contactless environment, families come and pick them up, to driving activities and kits to the homes of kids who don't have access, or putting activities, analog, hands-on manipulatives on the buses on the rural routes with the school lunch and the summer lunch route. So they're being very creative, and I couldn't be more proud of what they're doing to try to continue to reach the kids that are hardest to reach.
Thank you. That's amazing. Stephanie, why don't you tell us what Girls Inc. has done to date?
So as with Jennifer's situation, Girls Inc. is a system of affiliates across the nation and Canada. So we have different impact in different places. Initially, the hardest thing was to find ways to reach people virtually. And we really were not initially able to deliver all of the programming, and really honestly still can't do what we used to do because we were very intentionally in person and really relied on the one-on-one mentoring and the safe spaces we created. But pretty quickly we were able to get in touch with all of the girls, to find ways to reach them. We had to figure out how to create some safe means of doing that, text programs and those kinds of things. And of course, Zoom with its challenges, and Zoom bombing became an issue. But we've at this point been able to get connected to all of the girls, to see how they're doing, to make sure that they're safe. Girls Inc. affiliates that have centers had a lot of demand to do additional things we didn't used to do. For example, turned into food distribution centers in a lot of instances, became places where first responders' children were cared for during the day. Those kinds of things were not on our radar before, so those were not just adaptations of the old programming. That was sort of new work that we had to learn to do and learn to do pretty quickly. I think our biggest challenge is that we are so dependent on the in-person relationships that we have, that even though we have relationships established again, it is hard not to be able to do the sort of intentional in-person work that we do. The other thing that has been a challenge is that each state has its own system for reopening and thinking about reopening. There's a lot of anxiety in the network about best practices and about how to prepare for or execute a reopening. Summer camps are the bread and butter of a lot of our organizations. And so we're trying to figure out whether Girls Inc. has to do what the governor asks people to do in all of the instances, can do what the governor asks that the state do. Those are big questions for us with the resources that we have, because wanting to take care of the girls and be there for the girls is a constant in all of these organizations, and I'm sure in all of our organizations. But worrying about what that means in terms of safety and in terms of doing the right thing has been a really big question. So there's a level on which the national organization has had to be sure that the affiliates had the financial sustainability to get through this initial period of time. Girls Inc. made available from our national cash reserves $1 million to distribute as bridge funding to get people from the start of the COVID-19 crisis to the start of summer programming, because in a lot of cases, the revenue stream dried up as soon as the schools closed. So we've got that money out. People are ready to do what they can do during the summer, however that is. Depending on whether their state is open or not. It really is a whole bunch of different levels of programming, but they are putting all of that together at this point. And now we're looking to build greater resiliency financially across the network. That's a phase 2 of this for us, to make sure that whatever the next crisis is, whether it is racial unrest that prevents people from getting to the locations where their centers are, or concern about being sort of out of the house due to a pandemic or due to unrest in the streets, we need more resiliency to be able to weather the changes in revenue and the changes in venue and delivery method and location that seem to be coming up a little too frequently these days.
Thank you for that. Jim, how has BGCA responded to date?
Well, first of all, as you can imagine, this has been a challenging time for the reasons you said, but also really for our nation in terms of the impact on families and kids. And obviously that's what we're all talking about. My personal condolences and heart goes out to anybody that's been impacted by this coronavirus or by the recent violence that has been taking place across our country. More on that later. So like Jennifer and Stephanie, I think we all started out with one premonition of what was going to happen, and that was that we would all be back at work in 2 weeks. That quickly evaporated, and it's been over 2 months. And I think the impact is happening, or the devastation that's happening in these 2 months will take years to repair when it comes to our system. So to the question, obviously most of our clubs were closed immediately. And today, although some starting to reopen, as of last week, about 4,000 of our 4,700 were still closed. Now, like Stephanie described, we're facility-based, so quickly across our enterprise, clubs began to do alternate and modified services. And we're happy to say over 3,000 sites are doing that. And it includes a lot of what was already talked about: food service to youth, the grab and go approach, come up and get a meal and leave, to full supplies for an entire family for a week. And if individuals or families couldn't get to clubhouses, in many cases, we took the vans and buses and just delivered it right to their home, the food. Second of all is what's already been talked about, the virtual programming. And it's impressive to see the creativity that has been built up over a very short period of time. I think if we were taking on that initiative in a different time than now, it would have taken years to put together what's been produced literally overnight. So we are doing a lot of the same things. I think there's a lot of creative virtual and remote experiences that are happening, from the use of celebrities, as was described, all the way to engaging youth, teens, cool things like quarantine parties on Friday nights. This has been remarkable, and I think it's a muscle strength that'll continue to be with us for a long time. So that's been really good news. At the same time, we've had about 600 club sites open to serving youth of essential workers or healthcare workers, and certainly limited numbers in many of those cases, but all of the right precautions, health precautions, social distancing protocols in conjunction with the local health authorities or health department or CDC to make sure that the protocols were being followed to serve those youth of our frontline workers. So that has taken place and has been a mainstay in many communities across the country for Boys and Girls Clubs. At the same time, there's been an economic impact at the national level and local level. Thousands of staff have been either furloughed or let go, and certainly unknown as to when that might return or when they might be able to return, if at all. With that, I don't think the full economic impact has been felt yet. We've been blessed, like others, to have had the opportunity to take advantage of the payroll protection program and the funds that local clubs were able to secure along those lines, and other stimulus funds. Also, in times of need and challenge like this, as you see in really the fundraising aspect, private fundraising, you tend to get a little spike because of the outpouring of willingness to support and help, and we've seen that. But then you tend to go into a decline. We did establish what we called COVID-19 Relief Fund, and that was designed to support local clubs. And there was many aspects of it, everything from direct mail to digital marketing, TV, also to direct support from individuals as well as corporations. So we've been able to pass through, coming up, I think, on $13 million to our local affiliates, and more is coming in. And we're going to move that to a recovery phase. And I'll talk about that later. So those are just a few things, kind of really highlighting what Stephanie and Jennifer already did and building on it a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you all. So that was the easiest question I'm going to ask, because that's what you've done to date, and you know what you've done to date. Now I'm asking you to help our viewers think about the future, because I'm imagining folks who are tuning in to listen to you are people who are running organizations and care about youth, or in whatever field they're in. They're all asking the questions that I'm going to ask you, which are, what does the summer look like? And if you can think that far ahead, what does the fall look like? And that was a complex and uncertain enough question before the George Floyd murder and the uprisings and the widespread disruption across our country right now. So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal balls. And I know that each of you, while you don't know the future, you know that you have to try to plan for it, which is what I'm especially interested in. How do you plan for the future, which everyone's asking you? You're the leader. Where are we going when you really don't have a lot of facts to go on? So let me pick on Stephanie first on this one to talk about what does the summer or the fall, if you're bold enough to go that far ahead, look like for Girls Inc.
I mean, the summer is a fairly easy question because in many cases, the summer plans have already been made and the programs they're out there. I think summer looks like our best attempt at in-person programming that had to be altered because of distance requirements and safety and sanitation requirements. It was a scramble to learn and to decide what to do. In many cases, the mandate went out to reopen without clear direction on what that meant and what was required. And our network of affiliates got together on a phone call and linked arms and said, here's what we think is best, and we're all going to do this so that, this is the best we can think of. We made sure everybody had equal access to the resources we needed to execute on that, and just said, okay, this is, at least no one's doing any better or any worse than this, and we believe that it's right for the girls we serve. So summer, not that that was easy, but that's sort of the easiest thing, I think, for organizations like ours is faced with a crisis, children who need your help, adults pull together, they do something good, and they'll continue to refine it if it needs to get better. But I think action in response to an immediate need is probably really right in our wheelhouse in ways that crystal ball thinking is a little bit more challenging. For me, I think the fall looks like a debate about sort of the scarce resource of student time. Schools are already thinking about, things like splitting the shift and having kids come at different times. We are an out of school time program. We're mostly after school. When is after school if nobody goes to school at the same time, or if only half the kids go at the same time? But more to the point, learning loss that has happened and trauma that has happened to children in particular is what we're really thinking about. Not to mention the trauma that the adults have all kind of dealt with. I mean, we have a problem too, but I think we need to set that aside in order to really serve children. But there's been a significant period of time during which the majority of the children that we serve will not have been in the neighborhoods where they had an excellent online school happening with Wi-Fi that was consistent and everybody having a device that was dedicated to them to use during the day. That absolutely did not happen in most cases. In New York City alone, there were about 1,100,000 kids who needed devices, and the city proudly declared that they had developed a plan to give out 400,000 of them, which is great unless you weren't one of the kids who got one and you didn't have one. And everybody did the best they could. I'm not criticizing, but it leaves a lot of kids out. And even I know families who have so many kids, even though they're relatively well off, they don't have 6 computers. They didn't expect to need 6 computers, and they can't run 6 devices, streaming, a Zoom, and keep track of all those kids at the same time and be 2 parents. So not to mention the people who don't even have to work and who are sort of happily ensconced at home trying to kind of balance. A lot of the children we serve will not have had a good education last year and will have had that bad educational experience in the face of worrying about parents who are more likely than other parents to be in the front lines of the first response that gets them sick and gets them poor health care. Maybe they're undocumented and they can't even tell anybody they're sick. Maybe they don't even have 2 parents to choose from, and one parent gets sick and maybe dies. And so, as Jim was saying, there's a lot that they're dealing with, but the basis of it is that they're being left behind academically. No one can really fix that. I think all of our organizations could be part of fixing that, but school is thinking that the academic part of school is the most important thing. And as they say, okay, time with kids is a scarce resource and space in a building is scarce too, they're wanting to say, maybe we don't have time for you in your out of school time programs, when we're trying to say to them, we actually, if you reconceptualize school, we could be an important part of school. We can serve social and emotional learning needs for children. We can serve academic needs in lots of cases for children, or at least engagement needs that will help them. I mean, Girls Inc. isn't alone in, we don't do school, but we do literacy and we do science and we do math, and maybe it's peripherally and not curriculum based, but it helps kids stay engaged and stay eager to learn. I think we all have that in common, that we're not just a fun thing to do outside of school. And if schools continue to feel stressed about the resource of access to students, they won't include us in the solution in ways that I think they should to make that go forward. And I fear that what fall looks like is a period of learning that the hard way in many cases. I mean, to me, that's what fall is. And us going out and saying, please listen, here's what we're trying to offer. And schools saying, I don't even have time to think. I've got to fit 25 kids into 2 spots, and so that, to me, that's the struggle.
So really highlighting that when things reopen in the fall, to the extent they do reopen, they'll be very different. time will be crunched, and where is the role for the after-school provider that's been so essential? So Jim, what's your response to that? And are you hearing the same thing from folks in your network?
I would say, similar message to what Stephanie's articulated. I think your question really kind of is a building one too, into the summer and then into the fall. And I think the summer is going to give everyone a test run of what the fall will look like, because we use the word after school, but also out of school time, because in the summer it's all day long. So I do see the need for day long, partial kids, different kids at different times, but there'll probably be all day long services. I think the big challenge is going to be the need will far eclipse the ability, the resources, or the strict restrictions that are going to be in place. So I think this is going to be a lot of challenge for our network to decide which kids come and which ones don't. Now, I think the mitigating factor inside of that is going to be how school schedules, or whatever the decision is made there, are staggered or alternating, or different start times, whatever they do. That could be a little bit of the silver lining in terms of services. But I still believe in general, the need will be far greater than the ability or the resources to serve. So that's kind of point number one. I think point number two is you look at summer, and Stephanie, I think, alluded to this earlier, the restrictions in some states or cities or municipalities are still going to be in place, like right now, because this is summer. And therefore, the ability to serve a large number of youth is going to be limited, if at all. So I think we'll see a lot of our network not even be able to open all of their sites. They may open some, but not all, and in many cases won't be able to open, period. I anticipate probably 40% will be serving youth this summer in some fashion, but not what we would consider a normal summer. I think the third factor is going to play out as time goes on, and that is going to relate to insurance, and certainly PPE, the supplies, whether it's cleaning or protection, all of the additional things that are going to be needed, including the restrictions that'll be in place to serve youth. So there'll be a multiple layered challenge to what happens this summer and what happens this fall. So I think that's a little bit of what we're facing. The last piece I would add to this is, as the new normal, I guess that's getting overused, is brought to light here, it for sure will be different than whatever it was before. I think we all know that. And at the same time, when staff is coming back now and in the fall, the level of training, the level of support, of resources for the staff is also going to be far greater than it was before. And then add to that, what's happened in this country since that period of time, with the murder and really previous loss of life from so many others at the hands of unfortunately law enforcement and others that have been harmed or lost their life. The magnitude of that is also going to weigh heavy on staff, and we're going to need to have resources and support for that piece of the emotional connection as well.
Jim, the term I've been using now is the new abnormal, because it's nothing like a normal, and we need to keep reminding ourselves of that. So I appreciate you're saying it's overused. So Jennifer, it sounds like from what I'm hearing from your colleagues that every location is going to have a different set of circumstances, and you have more locations than anybody because you're in every county in the country. How are you guys dealing with all of that sort of variety and unpredictability, and where do you see the fall?
Right. Well, I'll start with the summer, and we're a little different than the other two place-based organizations because the core of our work is done outside of four walls. But the summer is one that we really do a lot of place-based activities, from summer camp being huge. There's camps in, 1/3 of the counties in the country, 4-H camps and state camps. Those are all in person, kids living together in facilities. And then there's the fair, which is in 4-H, the culmination of a year long of learning where you're showcasing whatever skill it was, your robot or your public speaking or your animal or your whatever you've done, your nutrition skills. So those have been, so what we see is a blend. So David, we're seeing it's really going to be reflective of the local communities. Most of our programs are going to be doing a blend of both. So kids will have, if their county is open and they can go to activities, they will be appropriate. But they'll also have access to more virtual activities since they won't be able to go to state-based team conferences or camps and those things that all happen in the summer. So we see almost everything pivoting to have a virtual aspect to it, and lots of innovation and creativity. When it comes to fall, I would say the same thing of a blend is what we expect to see. We work with schools. Typically, our work with schools is in the school day, some after school, but majority is during the school day, where our educators from Cooperative Extension and the land-grant universities bring in mostly science into classrooms and some of the social emotional learning through the club model. So we are already working with the superintendents and school districts on, as they're making their contingency plan A, B, and C, how can we be supportive? How can we, what we used to do in person, how can we do that virtually? We do have a lot of access. Our folks have a lot of facility with the virtual tools just because they come from the land-grant universities. So they're actually been helping the teachers in some cases where the teachers have different levels of understanding. And then we have so many resources, over 400 different things today on our 4-H at Home website, that the barriers are down. Anybody, anywhere can use any of those tools for free. So what used to be only in my state or only in my county is now available for all. So we see a new level of partnership. We're still in the process of building it, but that's what we're encouraging, is a new level of partnership with schools.
Thank you. Jim, you mentioned the speed with which change has been able to be made. Things that would have taken years, you were able to do literally overnight. And that leads me to my next question, which it hopefully has a more positive opportunity for you guys to think more positively about the future, which is changes that you had to make that you think will be permanent. And some of those that you think might be actual improvements that this has kind of pushed you to make. And then maybe also some permanent or long-term changes that you're not so happy about, but that you think will survive beyond this.